Well, hello, everyone, and welcome again to the podcast. And I'm really happy for you to get to know today Jeanine Rousso. Welcome, Jeanine. Glad you're here.
Thanks for having me, Gordon.
Yes, and Jeanine, we were talking a little bit before we started, and as the crow flies, we're basically neighbors, not too far away from each other, both of us in the Appalachian Mountains. And so I take pride in that. I don't know why, but I do. But anyway, Jeanine, as I start with everyone, tell folks a little more about yourself and how you've landed where you've landed.
Sure. Well, I'm a licensed counselor. I'm licensed in Georgia, Florida, and North Carolina, and have had a small private practice for several years. And in 2024, along with my co-founder, we started Therapist Resource Network. We are a 501c3 nonprofit, and we provide emergency financial support, burnout prevention and recovery, and advocacy for mental health clinicians.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So I've got to know the story behind how you started that and what prompted all of that.
Yeah, so it's actually, I feel like it's a long story with lots of little deviations, but I lived in Atlanta for 11 years. And when I lived there, there was a similar nonprofit that founded in the food and beverage industry that they provide emergency financial support for restaurant workers, caterers, and such. And I remember going to some of their fundraisers and I was like, oh, we totally need that in the mental health industry because nobody's getting rich as a therapist. And it just kind of stuck with me over the years. I wasn't really in a place to do anything with that idea at the moment. And as I got into doing clinical supervision, especially working with a lot of therapists who are new to the field and hearing how almost every single one of them was struggling financially unless they either came from, had a solid family support or a partner who contributed. And it just, I don't know, it just kept lingering and kept coming up in my head. And really in 2023, I needed to take a step back from client work personally. And so I delved into the depths of YouTube, learning a lot about how to start a nonprofit and all the hoops you jump
Hmm.
through, and which is very different from starting a for-profit company. And
Hmm.
my co-founder, Zandra, I took her to lunch and I thought I was going to have a hard sell. She and I were colleagues and I was actually her clinical supervisor. We always worked really well together. I thought it was going to be hard to sell her on this idea, but she was in immediately. And so we got to work and we founded at the beginning of 24 and then started handing out grants at the end of 24. Our first several, probably 8 or 9 grant recipients were impacted by Helene, which, living in the area that was hit so hard, we were doing a lot of the administrative stuff. And I was like, well, can we just get started? Because that survivor's guilt
Hmm.
of I'm in the middle of it. I was very grateful to not be impacted in any sort of significant way other than, power and water for a while. And so since then, we've been able to give out over 30 grants to mental health clinicians dealing with natural disasters, personal emergencies, medical issues. It kind of runs the gamut. And we've been really grateful to be able to support our colleagues who do so much for their clients and for the community.
That's so such a beautiful thing to be able to think about that and the way that you have. I know, yeah, I know. My family was affected by Helene, kind of indirectly. I mean, it was I shared with Jeanine at the beginning that my family has a place in North Carolina on a lake there, and we've had some damage and loss there, just a lot of sentimental stuff. But
Sure.
still, people that, and if you've been in that area, and I think about the people that are working and living, particularly around, there's an area called the Hickory Nut Gorge, and people have heard of the floods in Asheville and that sort of thing. It was absolutely devastating and catastrophic.
Mhm.
And so people were without food and water for weeks on end and,
Mhm.
power and that kind of thing. And so no way to, number one, run a business, but a practice and all of that with it's on top of you. So, I mean, yeah, much needed. And we just don't know really those kinds of things are things we can't really fully prepare for, I don't think.
Sure. Absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, and there was as I was thinking about our interview today, there was another phenomenon that happened. It was right after COVID, which is always interesting how we mark time by COVID now. But
Yeah.
there was, and see if you can help me remember the name of it. But there was a clearinghouse that handled all the insurance claims and all that sort of thing for providers in different areas, and they got hacked, and so it just took
Oh, yeah.
everybody down. It was I'm going to look it
Oh,
up while we're talking, but yeah, that kind
like,
of thing. Yeah.
yeah.
Um,
Yeah. I had forgotten about that for sure, that people weren't getting paid. And
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I'll think of it here in a minute, but yeah. How did you think about how to structure this? I mean, as far as I know, you delve into nonprofits and that kind of thing.
Honestly, it is a growing and changing structure and organization, and we're learning a lot as we go along.
Hmm.
Um, and it's really, it's been a lot of trial and error. We're kind of throwing things against the wall to see what sticks and see what people are needing. Like we started this year doing some programming. We did a handful of burnout prevention and recovery workshops that were really nice. And then we've also started some monthly therapist support groups that we are continuing once or twice a month. We're kind of dialing it down for the summer, but we'll probably pick back up in the fall to twice a month. And really, just as we're getting applications and as we're chatting with other people and networking and spreading the word, we get feedback, and we're just kind of adding that to what we do. There's
Hmm.
no, there is a plan, but it's certainly a flexible plan, as this is, again, something
Hmm.
we are figuring out as we go along.
Yes. Yeah, not to change too quickly, but it was called Change Healthcare was the
Yes.
big data breach that
Yeah.
happened, and it basically shut down the ability to file claims and that sort of thing. And so I
Yeah.
know a lot of us were struggling during that period to make
Hmm.
payroll and to get paid and all of that sort of thing. And so
Yeah.
things like that happened. So yeah, yeah. So curious, how have you gotten funding for your nonprofit and how does that occur?
Yeah, so most of our funding has been individual donors. We've had one or a couple of companies, for-profit companies that have made donations. We are hoping in the coming weeks to be launching some opportunities for companies to get involved through sponsorship of, our events or our newsletter, or also possibly through it's called a commercial co-venture. So, if there's a CEU company out there that has a training coming up that they want to donate $10 from every registrant to us, we'll promote that as well. And so we're looking at other ways for larger organizations to get involved, but honestly it's mostly been individual donors, which has been pretty cool.
Interesting. Interesting. No.
Yeah, I think some of the most meaningful donors to me are the therapists who are giving $5 to $10 a month, and that's what works for them. And it
Hmm.
all adds up. And right now, our grants are a flat rate of $500 for anybody that applies that is approved. Um, and so just a handful of donors can build up a scholarship, a grant.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what are kind of some of the criteria if somebody were to apply for a grant? What sort of things do you look for?
Yeah, so our requirements right now are that you're a master's level clinician who, at the time of the event, was working in the mental health field in some way, shape, or form. It could be, I mean, we've had people in academia, we've had lots of private practice people, we've had people working in agencies and hospitals, and a lot of people who work in multiple settings, right? As we do. The qualifying event had to be within the last 6 months or 180 days, and you do have to be a resident of the United States. The qualifying event, we kind of keep it pretty open, but it does, we have to have some sort of documentation. So certainly a natural disaster and being impacted in some way by the natural disaster. And then a lot of medical stuff that we've had. We've had a couple of pedestrian accidents
Mm,
and injuries. We've had cancer diagnoses. We've had people leaving a domestic violence situation. So it just, again, runs the gamut. We try to be as open and flexible as we can. If you can submit your documentation and answer our questions meaningfully, then we've been, knock on wood, we've been able to approve every grant, except for at the beginning when we were first getting started with Helene. We did get a lot of applications and we weren't able to fill all of
mm-hmm.
those. But since
Yeah.
then, if it's been if it's qualified, if it's met our qualifications and the documentation is there, we've been
Mm-hmm.
able to fill every grant that we've received an application for, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, that's good. That is good. Yeah, so what advice would you give people and just, other than seeking out grants, just thinking about being prepared for different things that might happen in our private practice?
Yeah, I think especially in the world of private practice, as much as you can to budget for time off, whether it's planned time off or unplanned time off, because there's
Mm-hmm.
always part of the human experience is getting sick and having medical issues, and we cannot avoid that. So as much as you can financially have your own nest egg, I think the other piece that's really hard for therapists is to take that time off and think about it from the ethical perspective too, of if
Mm-hmm.
you're not showing up, if you've just been through a life-changing hurricane or had
Mm-hmm.
unexpected surgery or a car accident or whatever it is, can just being aware of your own limitations and being mindful of the ethics around that. I think that's really tricky because there's also the fact that we don't get paid if we don't work when we're in private practice.
Exactly.
And it's a tricky balance, and I don't think there's a perfect way to prepare for that, but as much as you can factor that into your your financial planning, it's certainly
Mm-hmm.
helpful.
Yeah, I always, in doing consulting with people around their private practices, I always encourage people to build up at least a 3 to 6 month nest egg, if you will, or buffer to cover your
Mhm.
expenses and what you pay yourself and pay your people for those times. And I know
Yeah.
that was what kind of got us through in my practice during the Healthcare event that
Mhm.
happened. And also to your point about just self-care and the ethics of things, people that have been listening to the podcast for a while know that I lost my wife back in 2023 after years of battle with breast cancer and that sort of thing. And so I gave myself permission at that time to take a few months off. And so
Yeah.
I think being able to have that downtime to recharge your batteries, to be able to do the self-care. Yeah, we therapists are terrible at self-care.
Totally agree.
Yeah.
Add to that list though of preparing, of having a really good referral network of
Mm-hmm.
people that you trust that you can
Mm-hmm.
refer to if heaven forbid you have a big loss or you're diagnosed with cancer, or there's some other thing where you've
Mm-hmm.
got to take a significant amount of time off, that you can refer your clients and feel really comfortable and confident that you're matching them with a good fit for them.
And I would say to add to that, I think one of the things too that a lot of, and we haven't talked about this on the podcast in a while, and probably another episode idea coming up in my head, but having a professional will and,
Mm,
worst case scenario, something happens
mhm.
to you, either you get some sort of severe illness or you, heaven forbid you die or whatever, who
Yep.
takes over the practice and who helps things
Yeah.
continue, and having a clear plan for that and what that would look like. And
Yeah.
so that's a thing I would encourage everybody to do. Um,
Absolutely.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So, yeah, so if people are thinking about, okay, yeah, I'm in a rough spot, how do they apply and get in touch and that kind of thing?
Sure. Our application is pretty easy to find on our website, which is therapistresourcenetwork. I've tried to be very clear about the qualifications for the application, but if people have
Mm-hmm.
questions or they're not unsure, certainly they can reach out to us by email, and that is just therapistresourcenetwork@gmail.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and we encourage everybody to get on our email list. We send out a monthly newsletter, which always includes a couple of resources that are free for therapists. So usually something around self-care, something around the business side of or the trade side of
Mm-hmm.
therapy. And then we have a blog that either somebody on our team will write, or we often have guest bloggers if there's anybody interested in guest.
Yeah.
And then also we always include our upcoming events. So our therapist support circles that are happening. And one of the things I'm hoping to be more consistent with and maybe build a volunteer team around is some more burnout prevention programming, and then also some advocacy programming about, even the business side of practice, but also how to advocate for yourself
Right.
in this world of therapy that we're in right now.
Mm-hmm.
Um, as we know, the landscape has changed a lot, especially over the last 4 or 5 years, and therapists are having to do a lot more work to keep themselves employed, safe,
Right.
stable, and all that
Right.
stuff.
Yeah, it's definitely the landscape is changing a lot over the
Yeah.
years. And yeah, and I think yeah, just being able to be flexible with those kinds of changes is a huge thing as
Hmm.
well.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, being able to kind of lean into it and figure out, okay, yeah, I've had several episodes here lately just talking about AI and,
Hmm.
also the advent of tech companies, getting
Yep.
into the therapy space and that kind of
Yeah.
thing, and being able to be knowledgeable on all those things.
Yeah. And I think that we've it's one of the things that pushed us to actually jump into this when we did, is that to me, having been in this field for 20 years, I have found that it is harder and harder to have a financially sustainable career as a therapist. And that's
Hmm.
so disheartening because I love this job and I love the work. I sometimes have a hard time recommending this field to people who are thinking about it, because it
Hmm.
is, I mean, it's not, I don't want to say it's certainly feasible. I don't want to put
Hmm.
that out there, but I think it
Yeah.
has become harder to be financially independent and comfortable as a therapist. And some of that is
Hmm.
obviously the economy
Yeah.
is what it is
Yeah.
right now, but
Well, too, especially if someone is a solo therapist
mhm,
in private practice, it takes, as my friend David Hall says, a bit of intestinal fortitude to kind of push forward with things. But I
sure,
think there are lots of different ways in which therapists can diversify their income and even consider starting a group practice or a small group
sure,
practice. And it doesn't necessarily have to be this big, fantastical thing. It can be small and simple. And that's what I've done with my practice. My practice is a small practice, but
yeah.
I've done that intentionally.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, I think it's certainly feasible, but there's also a lot of therapists that just want to show up and be a therapist and have a reasonable caseload. And I personally believe that they should be financially comfortable as well. I like,
Yes,
it
absolutely.
doesn't seem like we should have to go out and diversify if we don't want to. Now, listen, I'm on your page. I love diversifying. I like to have my hands in a lot of different things, but I know
Hmm.
that's not for everybody. And I think
Right.
that's one of the things that's tricky about our field, is there's so much that like people who are not in it don't understand that there's so many different ways to be a therapist. It's not all
Hmm.
cookie cutter. It's certainly not 40 hours a week with benefits kind of job most of the time.
And the upside of private practice is it gives us the autonomy to be able to
Sure.
structure it however we want to.
Absolutely.
And that's huge. I know that was
Yeah.
one of my big motivators for going into private practice when I did years ago. So yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Absolutely.
sure. Well, Jeanine, got to be respectful of your time. And I know that we could talk about these things for hours, but tell folks again your website and how they get in touch with you.
Sure. Our website is therapistresourcenetwork.org. hop on our email list. And if you have questions or want to get involved, you can send us an email either through our website or therapistresourcenetwork@gmail.com.
Awesome. Awesome. And we'll have links in the show notes and the show summary for people to access that easily. So, well, thanks, Jeanine. It was great getting to know you, and hopefully we'll cross paths here soon.
Sounds good. Thanks, Gordon.